For her birthday, I took my girl Katie to Arizona so we could stay with some friends of hers and spend a few weeks partying and getting crazy and stuff before heading back to school for the year. We drove up in my dad's car. It's a really old Ford make, and it's pretty beat up. The road there was bumpy and long, and our relationship seemed as at its strongest on the road. We are really in love. That was our first time I realized that I had never truly have been in love before. We were about to halfway there when we realized we were going to run out of gas long before the nearest petrol pump. Katie's head was out of the window and sunglasses were blistering in the heat outside. Nothing but out of the wild desert landscape had to be seen in all directions. We became frantic. We didn't see another car on the road for almost an hour. What if we broke down here, in the middle of the desert, with no food or water, with no one out to look for us? I sped up slightly, driven by the fears. It was not even when we came across a gas station, smack bang in the middle of nowhere, in the dry, empty nowhere. It was an old, worn-out Servio, but of course long yellow grass blew into the breeze beneath it. Once outside, two rusted gas pumps. At first we didn't know if it was occupied. It seemed to be so lifeless. But as we pulled up and saw the petrol stains in the dirt, we were convinced otherwise. Katie started refilling the car, and I went inside to pay, and grabbing something to eat on the road. When I first went and opened the door, it's jammed. This perturbed me. I looked up at the sign to check and reassured that the store was open, according to from the torn sign that was hung between the dull yellow curtains at the door window. I pushed harder and harder, and with effort, I got into the shop. Inside, it was a really abandoned and left to ruin. Complete aisles lay on the ground. Fridges were smashed and glass coated on the floor, despite the brightness outside. The interior of the gas station was dark and bitterly cold. Then there came from behind me this quiet weeping, like a child's. I felt my heart race. It was coming from the back room. I stepped over the smashed glass and twisted the metal remains on the floor. Over where the patches of grass had grown through, I ran my hand along the wall and felt the creases across an ivy beneath my fingers. It was overgrown. When I came to the crying again, and now was facing in the back room door, it directly in front of me. I pushed the door open and it creaked in the rust with its joints. Inside there lay several wooden steps leading to the basement. It was pitch black, and the smell was horrific. The drip drop of water altered me to the fact that the basement was flooded, and the water was up to my knees. Again came the crying and a small splash from the far corner of the basement. "Hello?" I called out. "Is anyone there?" I started to approach the corner. The smell was horrible. The cold water eventually got to me, and the sobbing was getting louder. In the corner, I swore I saw something move amongst the shadows. "Hello?" I called again. "What's wrong?" I finally reached the corner, still dark, and I had to bend down to avoid the pipes, which leaked and down my back and trickled down my spine. To figure out, right in front of me was a very small and black-hung chauffeur, sobbing quietly with its head in his hands. "Why are you down here?" I whispered. Then it stopped moving completely. It was totally still. All noise seemed to be ceased, but for the quiet dripping of the broken pipe somewhere behind me. I outstretched my arm to touch its tiny shoulder, but then it began to slowly turn in my direction, to look me eye to eye. And its face was shriveled and looked around into mine. I remember screaming and swinging my head up in recoil, cracking up the pipes above. The face was white as a sheet, pale like a hideous moving mask. The eyes and mouth were completely black holes, huge and widening. Even I looked at them. They were so huge, they almost consumed the entire face. As desperately as I tried to escape, it splashed towards me at rapid speed, uncurling its long, thin fingers, and it was wailing now, staring into me with its huge black eyes. As I scrambled up the stairs with great difficulty, as I felt my legs begin to give way beneath me. I sprinted out of the water and up the stairs towards me. I slammed the door, flipped the lock, and tore it right out of the store and into the old Ford. Katie began to laugh when she saw me. Jeans wet, trembling with sweat, soaking my chest, but I grabbed her and screamed at her to drive. For about a half an hour, I could barely tell her what happened in the store. She listened and gave me a look of sheer horror when I finally gave in and told her everything. She pulled the car onto the side of the road and began to cry herself. I asked her what was wrong. She said, "I saw something while you were gone. When you were in the store, I was just pumping up the gas when I saw this little girl and a man, her father, I guess. The father stared at me with blank eyes and a hanging jaw, but the girl, oh God, the girl, she was staring straight at me, grinning with this huge smile that had just stretched so far across her face. I couldn't see any hair on her. Her skin was so dark, not dark-colored girl, but dark like a shadow. Her smile had just shone through the window, and I was convinced myself it was a trick of an eye and looked away. When I looked back, they were gone. Then, a little while later, you came back out. It was dusk by now, and we had nowhere to stay, and we had not traveled as nearly as much as we hoped for that day, and the nearest motel meant going back past the gas station. So we just drove up from the roadside where we were and into the clearing just a little way up, where people camped sometimes. We had obviously come to the night after a big party. There was broken glass everywhere. When we arrived, however, it was empty. After a while, I tried to reassure her that we were okay. I calmed her down, put my arms around her, and we started to kiss. As I moved closer to her, when suddenly she screamed like hell itself, "It's her! It's her!" She screeched, fumbling up and starting the engine. I turned in time to witness the small black face, grinning literally ear to ear with the only darkness inside. If it was crawling up to my car and through my open window, with its limbs splayed out like an insect. It had too many limbs, and there were too many long arms. The fingers began feeling my face like an antennae when we sped off back down to the road. Back onto the road, nothing seemed right. There were no stars. That was in fact when I noticed first. I was too shooken up to think of much of it, but there were no clouds that could be bottling them out, and there was just this vivid night sky, devoid of all light. Then within a few minutes, after we had been driving forward, still sweating and breathing heavily, we passed the gas station. My heart skipped a beat. The gas station was at least a half an hour away in the opposite direction. All lights were on, and I saw the doors sliding open. As we shot past it, Katie was in so much hysterics, she found it hard to keep driving. We stopped the car in the middle of the desolated road. I decided we should switch seats so that I could drive. She shuffled across from her seat to mine, and I opened the door to get out. As soon as I was outside, a foul stench of the basement overwhelmed me. I gagged and then vomited down on the side of the car. It was then I took notice that it was a runner, a pale white thing, sprinting towards us through the fog, and its limbs were practically in a blur, and I could make out, but with no face. How long has it been following me? Running past us in the night? I got into the driver's seat as quickly as possible. We drove off again, not talking. Katie whimpered, and I silently prayed. Then we passed the gas station again, and the door was now open now. There was 2 figures standing at the door, waiting. As we forced ourselves on, we both became more aware of the soft, barely audible weeping at the back of the seats. Neither of us even dared to turn around. "Ignore it," I whispered, trembling, my hands gripped onto the steering wheel. Katie was curled up into a fetal position, holding her head in her hands, waiting for the increase becoming extremely loud, ear-piercing, and horrific. Finally, I ordered myself to end it and looked at behind me. For a split second, I thought it was a girl in a white dress looking back up at me, but she was gone as soon as she had appeared. I checked the seats carefully, and there was nothing. Into my tiredness and fear, I had completely lost track of the road. I drove on, and through all the night, Katie had whimpered. I touched her once, but she screamed. I never tried that again after that. The noises from the back seat started up again. We passed the gas station twice more. The people at the door were more closer and clearer each time. Then the finest sliver of a red light had begun to settle on the horizon, as it was dark as hell. But at least I was able to see the road ahead of me now. Katie had been silent, face concealed under her hands for a few times, but of course, I decided to just check on the time. I turned on the radio, and first there was only static instead of time, or if anything at all. The digital clock simply appeared black. I fiddled with the dial, trying to change the station. In between the static, I only found one audible channel. It had a high-pitched buzz in the background. It was some writer's note. A man was muttering some names and numbers under his breath. 29 Lucy, 30 Adam, 31 Katie. I switched it back to static. I knew which name was next. When we got to Katie's friend's house, it was morning. It was overcast and everyone had the smell of rain on it. Her friends weren't home. Katie's friends had lived way out in the country, with no one else around for a mile. The grass was climbing the walls outside. How long have they been out? As soon as we were inside, Katie started whimpering again. I realized that while she had been silent, she was biting on her lip. Blood was trickling down her chin, and the skin around her mouth was torn and chewed through. She grabbed the newspaper and some masking tape off the table and began blocking out the windows. After the night's events, I didn't even know whether I would be insane to join her or stop her. I simply watched. She covered the windows, jammed the door, and turned on the lights off. For some time, it could have been minutes or hours, we both sat there in silence in the dark. I offered to turn the television on. Katie said nothing, sitting back in the comatose. I turned the television on anyway. A grainy black and white image flickered into life before us. A white face, with empty eyes, and an impossibly huge smile flashed up. The smile was growing wider and wider the longer we stared into it. Then came a sound of weeping. From the television or in the house, I couldn't tell. We turned off the TV. It has been 3 whole days now. I haven't seen Katie at all today. She spends her time in the closet, crying. I once tore the door open and screamed at her. She screamed at me back, her face contorting into something grotesque and inhuman. I slammed it in her face. The phone rings. Often a voice, my mother's, I believe, whispering under the breath. I can only catch snippets of what she says. Come back. You're always welcome to come back. Sometimes in the background, I hear quiet chuckling. I hang up, without saying anything. Usually the bathroom is shining white. I can hear the shower running, and I will walk into to find nothing at all. When I am in the bathroom, I will hear that television flick back on. It will always go to that face in the background. There was always muttering voices now. I've called the police twice. All I get is whispering in the woman's voice. I called Katie's friends too, just as fruitlessly. They are the knocks at the door a lot now. Through the newspaper on the other side of the window, I could see hands slam against the glass and slide down. They do this for hours on end sometimes. They press their eyes up against the glass, through the holes of the newspaper. At night we hear screaming from the guest room. I boarded it up. Sometimes I find tiny pieces of glass on the ground. A leak sprang up about a day ago in my room downstairs. Black spots of mold appeared on the walls, and there was a smell throughout the house, seeping from my room, the odor of decay. I pray hopelessly and I swear to God I wish that I never got out of that car. And that, my little pretties, was Arizona, a regular creepypasta. My final thoughts on the story? Well, pretty good creepypasta, actually. I would have to sit here and say this now. I actually really like this story. This is a pretty good creepypasta. Although I would have to say I've never been to Arizona before, so that's something I'm definitely saying now. I've never been to Arizona before. It's a state in the US, in case if you guys are wondering, but I'm sure most of you guys already know. Now, Scarefeeder did talk about this creepypasta in one video, and I actually was kind of interested in this story when I saw that. So I actually saw Mr. Creepypasta's narration of it from 8 years ago, and he re-narrated it, I believe, back in 2000, sometime 3 years ago. He did a re-narration of it, so I recommend you go check out those videos out. I did see some other people have narrated this story. I mean, it's a really good story. Basically what this story is about, it's about a couple going to Arizona, and while they're traveling in Arizona, they end up, having some paranormal, stuff going on. And I mean, it's messed up, to be honest, of, what's happening in it. I'm like, holy hell, it's pretty messed up. Now, I'm gonna sit here and say right now that I actually find this one to be a pretty good pasta. Although, to me, I do find this to be more of a horror story than a creepypasta, but it's still a good story for what it is. Now, one thing I have to say was that I like how the concept of its own self was. I like how, it's all played out. Like, I mean, it's pretty interesting. When I first saw this story, I actually decided to give this one a shot, and yeah, here I am now reading this, and I'm just doing a review on it. So, it is on the regular Creepypasta Wiki. If you guys want to check it out, I believe you guys should really check this story out because this story was pretty good. Now, I mean, when they go to this house later on and they think they're safe when they're not, like, I mean, it's pretty messed up, to be honest. I'm not gonna lie. This one is a pretty good pasta for what it is, but it's also messed up at certain parts. Now, if you guys are gonna ask me a question, am I planning to go to Arizona? Well, I think I might consider maybe going to Arizona one day, but that I'm not really sure. I've never had time to, go to Arizona, so yeah. It's possible that I might consider, going ahead and doing, taking a look at it, but yet again, who really knows? It's hard to say. I might consider taking a look at this if I, take a look at, yeah, that state, yeah. Anyways, what did I actually like about this episode story? Well, for one, it's not, cliched or anything. It evolves with something paranormal, which it is really messed up, to be honest. Like, I mean, it's really messed up when it came to this story. Like, when I first saw this story was honestly very messed up. Like, I find this still to be more of a horror story than a creepypasta. That's probably just to me, but if you guys want to call this a creepypasta, that's totally understandable. Because I understand, that this is honestly a really fun story to narrate. Like, I personally found this one to be, awesome. And if you guys think that, you guys want to find a good story, I highly recommend you guys check out this story. You guys will not be disappointed. So, anyways, with that being said, I do have to say is that the grammar is really good, along with the plot of the story. It's really well written. I like the storyline behind it. I like how beautifully this story was written out. It was fantastic. So, to the author who wrote this story, I really have to say, you did a pretty good job with this pasta. And I'm not denying that at all. Like, this pasta was amazing. If you guys want to check out Mr. Creepypasta's narration of this story, I highly recommend you do so. Because Mr. Creepypasta, I have seen him, read a couple of stories. And, he's probably another inspiration I got into creepypastas besides the Shadow Reader. Mr. Creepypasta and Creepypasta also inspired me. So, there's that. Now, With that being said, I do not know who the original author of this story is. I just want to put that out. I'm not sure who the original author of this story is, so yeah, and as of now, I don't know who the original author is. So I am gonna be um stating that now. Since I can't, really find, put credit on who the original author is, I'm just mainly gonna sit there and, well, basically leave it as anonymous for now. If I ever find out who the original author of the story is, I'll be sure to give him or her proper credit. Like, if he or she manages to find this story and happens to comment on this video, if he or she were to be the author and find this story, I'll be sure to give him or her proper credit then. So anyways, it's just going to state as anonymous for now. Now anyways, that being the case, that being said, like I'm going to say, this is just simply my own personal opinion. You happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be I'm gonna give this one a 10 out of 10. It was beautifully well written, it was definitely enjoyable. I really find this to be more of a horror story, but if you want to call this a creepypasta, that's perfectly up to you guys. Another thing I have to say is that I really still find this story to be fantastic. I really do like how beautifully well written this was. I like the concept. I love everything about this story. And I have to say, it's really messed up of what's going on with this girl's Katie's head, in this story. Like, I mean, I was like, holy hell. Like, I mean, I was very surprised that some crazy shit was happening in this, well, protagonist's girlfriend in her mind. So, I mean, it's pretty freaky, to be completely honest. Now, with that being said, what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what we have done person to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave me now with your thoughts or down in the comments below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode, and if you're brand new here to this channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload, so that way you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro, because I'm out.